Can you guys hear me back there? All good? Perfect, thank you. So anyhow, welcome. Today we're going to talk about skills and talent. So before I get started, how many of you are developers? Okay, how many of you are operations? Oh, we have a nice mix. Anybody security? No, security. Oh, one guy in the back is going, yeah, maybe. Okay, I don't want to. What are the roles? Any other roles other than development, operations, or security? Architect? Automation architect? Just general enterprise architect? Yeah? Okay. All of you are obviously Jenkins users? Awesome. Okay, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about skills. Have you been hearing a lot about skilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, right? T-shaped talent. Have you been hearing that term a lot? Become a T-shaped professional. So I'll tell you a little bit about DevOps Institute, I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then what I really want to do today is talk about what are the skills that regardless of whether you're DevOps, whether you're dev, whether you're ops, security, architects, that really you need to know in order to go through the digital transformation. And I'm going to tell you a lot of these skills are regardless of what role you hold today. Okay, that's going to be the foundation of being a T-shaped professional. So a little bit about me. I am CEO and co-founder of the DevOps Institute. If you're not familiar with us, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I mean, I've been in IT a long time, and I always say, you know, it's a little bit longer than I actually want to confess to, but some of you may remember black and green screens. Right? I come from Wall Street. I've worked in a lot of different verticals. I was involved in the Unix community before Unix went commercial. So I've had an opportunity to kind of see the evolution of IT, not from its early days, I'm not that old, but really from the commercial adoption of technology as a competitive advantage across multiple types of vertical markets and enterprise. I've worked in nonprofit, I've worked in hospitality, I've certainly worked in the financial sector. So I said, I've had a chance to kind of see the growth. I am an accidental technologist. So I don't have a bachelor's degree in computer science. I don't have an MBA. I learned it on the streets. So again, I have kind of a little bit of a grassroots. I was a senior IT director for a long time. I was CIO of a nonprofit for a long time as well. So again, hopefully a little bit of what I bring is not only what we've researched at DevOps Institute in terms of skill, but also looking at the evolution of the IT professional. So if you're not familiar with the DevOps Institute, we are the Association of DevOps Professionals. We're a member organization. Good news is, at least for now, membership's free. So if you're not already a member of the DevOps Institute, please go to our website and become a member. There's Slack channels, there's job boards, there's some content that's really meant specifically for the member community. Our goal is to really create continuous learning as a lifestyle, but also give DevOps professionals the opportunity to network with other DevOps professionals. We also have 7 certifications around DevOps skills. And so talk a little bit about that. That's not what this session is all about, but we spend a lot of time researching what are the emerging skills that organizations are hiring and professionals are starting to acquire. So no master's professionals, none of the ambiguous. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I said, if you're not a member, go ahead and go to the website and become a member. So let's start our story with looking at IT. IT is a system of systems. Everybody get that, right? If we look at traditional IT, we understand that agile software development is a system. Right, it is a system of development, iterations. I'm a Scrum Master, right, where we start to take our teams, soon to be known as squads, and we apply Scrum basics. So we operate from a backlog, we do retrospectives, we usually have 2 to 4 week sprints, and that is a system that, that developers have been using probably now for a while. How many of you do agile software development? Right, most of you, right? If I'd asked the same question maybe 5, 8 years ago, I said, how many of you doing waterfall? You probably would have all raised your hands as well, right? So within IT, if we start to look at the evolution of IT, we move from waterfall to Scrum, right? How many of you are Scrum Masters? A couple, right? I'm a Scrum Master, right? And so, you know, we started to look at software development as a system, but but it was a contained system, right? It was a system within the development community where the Scrum teams were mostly made up of developers with very, very little influence or engagement of, say, operations. Then we introduced CI, CD, CT, right? So we started to look at continuous development and delivery as another system, right? So whatever the product comes out of the Scrum team gets passed downstream into some type of a pipeline. Some of it's manual, some of it's not. You may see some of the ITIL processes sitting underneath all of these systems. And then once we deploy, whether we push the button to deploy or the button pushes itself with continuous deployment, now we have kind of continuous operations, and we start to look at another system that's post-production. So if you look at this graphic, you can see that when we talk about IT, we really are a system of systems. Can you see where you fit in that? Where you play the most? Notice I say play, I don't say work, right? Where you play the most. And you can also see from a process perspective, from a skills perspective, if I'm a developer, right? I write code. If I'm a release engineer or an automation architect, I focus on release automation, I focus on build, test, deploy. And if I'm post-production, whether I'm support, systems administration, DBA, then I operate sort of within that blinder or that silo, right? But at the end of the day, DevOps can't operate this way. Can you see that? Right? Anybody here a test-driven developer? Right? A year from now, you all have to raise your hands, right? A year from now, you all need to be test-driven developers. That's part of becoming a T-shaped professional. It is a requirement for digital transformation. And by the way, it's not just test-driven developers. It's test-driven infrastructure people. Anybody infrastructure? Right? You're going to be test-driven infrastructure folks, right? The first skill I'm going to tell you that everybody needs to acquire is you need to learn how to test, right? Because everything is code. Infrastructure is code. Security is code. Code has to be tested. So whether you become a deep tester or you have enough testing skill to be able to write a test case, read a test log, right, operate test automation, that's going to be a skill that you're going to need to acquire somewhere within probably the 12 to 24 month period, right? That's part of digital transformation. So I've talked a little bit already about being T-shaped, right? T-shaped is important for systems thinking. If we think of IT as a system of systems, then systems thinking, some of you may see it as design thinking. We have to be able to look across the entire spectrum, across the entire value stream, right? And we also have to be cross-functional ourselves, right? No handoffs. Have you been hearing that mantra, right? No handoffs. So if we're not going to hand off, then we have to have the ability to groom those skills ourselves. Now, it's not a one-man shop, right? Jane can't be a developer, an infrastructure, an architect, a systems administrator, a DBA. I can't operate IT on my own. I could try, right? But I can't. But the value of being a T-shaped individual is you will still always have your specialty. That's the stem of the T. So if you're a developer, your core competency is you're a developer, right? If you're an operations person, your core competency is still operations. But what you're going to need to do going forward is develop what we call breadth of knowledge, right? So enough knowledge about a lot of different competencies so that you can be a test-driven developer who can write a test case before you write your first line of code. Does that make sense? Right? It makes sense? Now, by the way, let me stop here and tell you something really fantastic. Nowhere else, no other business unit in the organization encourages as much learning today as IT. All right? We are all really lucky to be in an industry where continuous learning is not only an option, it's a requirement, right? So the days of I operate within my silo and I operate within a single stream and I have a very specific competency, we grew that. So I've been in IT a long time, right? In the early days, there were 25 people in a Wall Street law firm, big Wall Street law firm, that were IT. You know, that same law firm probably has a couple of thousand people in IT right now. We grew this tree to be very siloed. But today, you are absolutely encouraged/required to be a continuous learner, right? So that's part of being the T, right? You'll still always have your competency, but you have to develop enough breadth of knowledge about multiple other competencies or other skills in order to be a good contributor to what was once considered a scrum team and today might be considered a squad. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, if you really want to move forward, you could become pie-shaped. Right? We have 2 competencies, or comb-shaped. But for today, we're not going to focus on that. Today, your goal, if you're not already, is to become a T-shaped professional. T-shaped professionals will contribute the most to their organizations. They will also be the most hireable. And with the talent gap that we have today, it is the T-shaped individual that's going to win the role that you or somebody else may want. All good? Anyone today, are you a T-shaped person? Raise your hand if you're a T-shaped person today. Awesome. Anyone want to strive to become pie-shaped? Right? Fantastic. Right? Maybe comb-shaped?
I am comb-shaped.
Okay, awesome. Right? But that's rare. It's rare where we have that many specialties. Do you work for a large organization or a small organization?
Mid-size.
Mid-sized organization. Usually when you start to see that, you see it in a smaller organization because you don't have the kind of resource that other organizations would have. So keep that in mind as we continue to talk about this.
Could you give an example of pie and comb?
So pie shape may be somebody that is, if you look at squads, right? So in many squads, site reliability engineer, one of the requirements of being a site reliability engineer is the ability to code. SRE may have come from the development space and have very, very deep coding experience, but also very deep operational experience. So they would have the ability to kind of do both, particularly if you've evolved from another role to where you are today. Now, it isn't just technical knowledge. If you look at this, I think it's really important. Breadth of knowledge also includes business knowledge, right? It understands best practices, principles, and processes. And I will tell you from talking to a lot of people here and just from a lot of experience with multiple verticals, sometimes we look at the technology as the competency or the technical capability as the competency, and sometimes it's the best practices and the principles that are important. So I'll go back to testing. It is important that you know how to use test automation. How many of you do manual testing? Few, right? So at some point, you're hopefully going to migrate into test automation, right? Continuous testing. Understanding manual testing is really important because you can't replicate it in automation unless you understand it manually, right? But understanding what the best practices are in testing is as important as understanding how to use a particular technology, right? Because you could apply that to any technology and still come in with that level of expertise. So understanding best practices and principles, even some that don't necessarily apply to you, right? So if we look at DevOps and we think about safety cultures, or we start to look at some of the cultural aspects of DevOps, or we look at value stream mapping, which is not really a technical competency, having that skill also enables you to be a leader regardless of what your title is. Right, so there's other practices there as well. And from a cultural side, we talk a lot about how culture is really important to the evolution of DevOps for the success, the transformation. The theme here is transformation, right? We talk about cultural, and sometimes the word cultural feels really surgical. Like we're going to surgically remove your old culture and surgically attach a new one. And that's not true, right? That's not true. I mentioned things like value stream mapping, the evolution of creating a squad, knowing which applications, how do you groom T-shaped people in your organization. Those are real skills, right? Those are real skills. Managing conflict is a real skill, right? Because you have a position there as well. So again, skills modernization, the good news is that a lot of organizations are investing in that. Anyone have skills modernization programs in your organization right now? Couple, right? Couple. You're starting to see more and more and more of that where really the term skilling not killing, skilling, has become a part of our normal IT vocabulary because organizations recognize that they have to invest in people, whether it's new hires or existing staff, they have to be able to invest in the skilling spectrum. So that's important as well. So transformational talent knows how to break down silos. I mentioned about squads, and I know some of the people in the room sat through DevOps Leader this week, and so we talked a lot about this whole kind of squad mentality, and I don't have enough time today to tell you about how to create a squad. But if you think of it from a vocabulary perspective, the word team, now I want you to visualize a squad. Anybody been in the military? Okay, for those of you in the military, a squad is not a team of people all with the same skills, right? What's the difference with a squad? How do you make up a squad? Somebody. Sorry? A group of specialists, right? But there is a little bit of cross-pollination of knowledge, right? Because heaven forbid, squad member leaves. We have to be able to backfill that as well, right? So we have to be able to protect each other, but we also have to know enough about each other's specialty in order to do that. That really breaks down silos. And if you get a chance to see the Spotify, anybody ever heard of the Spotify squad model? I know some of you were in class, right? Start to listen to the video about Spotify and talk about squads. You can really see the fact that their squads are really multidimensional, and everyone on the squad is a T-shaped, at least, professional from there as well. So skilling the squad, right? This comes from Spotify. Skilling the squad, if you have multiple autonomous squads, autonomy is really important. We tell the story of ING. You know who ING is? Anybody here from ING? ING converted their entire organization into squads, including the business. Right? And that's pretty brave. That means each of the squads was really autonomous in terms of their skills. It means that embedded in that squad was operational capabilities, was development capabilities, was infrastructure capabilities, right? They really built these autonomous squads. Now, they had other squads that, had infrastructure capabilities that went beyond it, like kind of a lending resource. But if you really start to look at this kind of autonomous approach, it means that they had to build this with individuals that had a wide variety of talents. So let's talk about real skills, right? So hopefully you all understand now the value of being T-shaped or comb-shaped, right? You understand the fact that your current level of skill, regardless of whether you're comb-shaped or not, you could be adding more, what do they call them, times to the comb, right? Is that you are in a continuous learning cycle right now, regardless. So let's talk about some real skills. The first skill is the value stream. You have to understand your value stream. Anybody done a value stream map in your organization? Couple of you sat through value stream mapping this week as well, right? It is the starting place, the recommended starting place for DevOps. And if your organization has done it, then you should understand what your value stream is. If your organization has not done it, by the way, it's not one value stream, but for argument's sake, let's say you're going to value stream a part of your organization, you need to understand from concept to deployment and beyond, right? What's your delivery look like? What are the activities that are associated with it? How much time does it take? And then little by little, you can start to scale backwards. So the first skill you need to acquire is understanding a value stream. Not a life cycle, right? Not a life cycle, value stream. The difference is really significant. It's not semantics, right? Understanding how you create value in your organization, value to your customers, and how that value is created, how much time each step in the value creation takes, and how to increase the velocity of your team to create value, right? How to go faster is important as well. But you also have to understand the value stream has multiple elements, right? The value stream certainly is made up of people, process, and technology. And so your value stream is not going to be your pipeline. Really want to make sure that's very clear. Your value stream is not your pipeline. Pipeline is important, right? But your value stream is not your pipeline. You do need to understand cultural skills. You do need to understand Agile and ITSM and Lean and DevOps, but not at a deep level. right? Value stream mapping is actually a lean capability, right? How many of you come from an idle environment? A few of you, right? Y'all hate change management, right? Everybody, right? Just everybody give me a collective eye roll. But you do need to understand what those processes are because you can't make them better unless you at least understand the goals of a process like change management or incident management, knowledge management, things like that. CI/CD. If you are not directly involved in CI/CD, you need to understand at least what those core capabilities, those core concepts are. Maybe you're not going to be a continuous delivery architect. Maybe you're really, handing it off from a Scrum team. But you need to understand what those competencies are. And from an Agile perspective, who here, well, we stay in the room, stays in the room, who here really has had very, very little exposure to Agile concepts, Scrum's concepts, right? First time I saw them, I kind of went, what? Right? Like, what? Everything I do, I come from the ITSM space, everything I did just got completely invalidated.
Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, but
Yeah. So if you have no familiarity at least with the basics of Agile, Scrum, right, understanding that, then download the Scrum guide. It's about 35 pages, right? But that's a competency everybody has to have because we talk a lot about doing Agile. We don't talk a lot about being Agile. Right? So everybody has to have some familiarity with that. And on the automation side, again, I don't necessarily have to be a Jenkins expert, but if we're a Jenkins environment, I should know a little bit about it. Right? I should know what the capabilities of Jenkins are, even if I don't have a direct relationship. And that's part of the upping of the skill. Cultural skills. Transformational leadership, we were talking about that earlier today. Do you know what the difference between servant leadership and transformational leadership is? Where's my Scrum Masters? What's a servant leader? Come on, the name implies it, right? If I'm a servant leader, what do I do to the team?
Get blocks out of the way and help the team succeed.
Say it again?
Get roadblocks out of the way and help the team.
Exactly. I remove impediments from the team. I serve the team and I protect the team so that they can complete whatever iteration they've been chosen to do out of the backlog in the period of time of a sprint. Transformational leader is an inspirer. Now, you could be both, right? But you should understand what transformational leadership is because regardless of the role, every one of you is a transformational leader, right? It's how to inspire change. Right? It's how to take those that would not go on their own across that transformation, digital transformation. So understand this. Westrum, how many of you have heard of Westrum? You might see this in some of the presentations. Westrum looks at the flow of information and how that affects the culture of the organization. For example, if you're a pathological organization, isn't that a horrible word? Right? You shoot messengers. Right? Maybe flows of information, bad news, right? You don't want to be the bearer of the bad news. In a generative organization, which is the other end of the spectrum, right, the messenger is appreciated. So understanding, again, from a cultural perspective, how does information flow throughout your organization? And what can you do to be able to help that as well? Best practices, how many of you read the Phoenix Project? A bunch of you. Gene will be really happy. But it's a great book, and it's also because it is a novel, it's a great opportunity for, as a transformational leader, start a book club, right? Start a book club in your organization. Talk about the 3 ways. Understand how Parts Unlimited went from where they were, and that poor person that was designated in that role with the laptop held together with duct tape, right? Suddenly came through. Talk about security. Use it as a focal point, right? DevOps Handbook. How many of you have read the DevOps Handbook? A few of you, right? Continuous Delivery, Jez's Continuous Delivery book. Again, another great basic practices and principles. Right? And then Accelerate, right? Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble's Accelerate book is awesome. Mirko Herring just wrote DevOps for the Modern Enterprise. So again, be curious, be innovative, understand. Again, not at a deep level. You don't have to become an idle expert. You don't have to become a Scrum Master. Right? You just need to understand the basic principles because you can't fix things if you don't know about them, right? And you can't make assumptions because you know what they say about assume, right? Automation, you know, we have such a wide range of automation, right? And I realize some of these logos actually need to be updated. But, you know, this is just a small sampling. You walked out on the exhibit floor, you saw a whole lot more. Now, again, you can't become a deep expert on every single one of these products, but you should understand the categories of what those products are, right? So that you can help your organization make some good decisions. Now I'm going to get a little bit more detailed on this. Depending on your role and depending on what your current knowledge is, you need to have a high-level understanding of all of these. So as I said, if you are not a developer, you need to understand what agile software development is all about, right? You need to understand what the role of the product owner is and Scrum Master and what a retrospective is and what a backlog is and how to groom, right? What a burn down chart is. I'm throwing out a lot of terms here. You need to understand the basics of the Agile Manifesto, right? That's not really very time consuming, and by the way, it's free. But you should understand how software development is done in an Agile approach, because as I said before, it's more important to be Agile than to do Agile, and the only way agility crosses the value stream is if everybody has a common understanding of that, right? Very important. I said everybody had to learn to test. Who's not a coder? Anybody not a coder? So here's the news. You have to learn basic coding skills. Now, I have to tell you, I have never been a coder. I can read code kind of like I read French, right? I might miss a little bit, right? But I can read it basically. Everybody has to develop some type of core coding skills. Site reliability engineers, have you been hearing about SRE? Right? Number one skill for SRE, particularly for those of you operations, coding in Python. Right, I was at SRECon 2 years in a row. First year, a lot of the SaaS-based Silicon Valley companies had booths, right? Talked to a lot of them. What's the number one skill that a SRE needs? Coding in Python. Second year, tripled the number of exhibitors, right? Oh, and by the way, those exhibitors, you know, the usual suspects, right? Facebook, Google, Netflix, right? Capital One, Comcast, American Express, every one of them were manned by their talent acquisition HR teams, all right? So they're all looking for talent, and they're all looking for SREs who are operational engineers and can code in Python. So if you're not a coder, you know, Python in 30 days, right? There's lots of opportunities, but everything's code, right? DevSecOps is security as code, infrastructure as code. SRE is engineering for operations, and engineering SRE practices are emerging at a very, very rapid pace, right? Operational people like me who've never really been a coder have to be able to do that. Security is no longer a downstream activity. Are you hearing a lot about DevSecOps? Right? 18 months ago, DevSecOps, they were still debating whether it was rugged DevOps, Sec DevOps, Biz DevOps, BizSec DevOps, right? Question's been asked and answered. It is now officially DevSecOps. I was at a DevSecOps day. Some of you may have been there at RSA. Anybody go to the RSA conference? I know we don't have a lot of security people. 1,000 people walked into the DevSecOps days. It was a one-day event. Right? 1,000 individuals walked into that room to hear about DevSecOps, most of whom were security professionals, a lot of whom were not. So if security is not your thing, part of your becoming a T is you have to develop some very, very basic security skills. Because DevSecOps not only shifts it left, it shifts it everywhere. Right? So security has to be early in the development life cycle. It's all the way pervasive, all the way through, and into production, right? So we have to be able to at least have some really core knowledge about that. Containerization and microservices, who's operating like Kubernetes, Docker, right? Who's broken down their services, many of their services into microservices, right? Not easy, right? Not easy. Taking the big uglies and, you know, particularly old legacies. But you have to at least understand what a container is. You have to at least understand what a microservice is. Right? Again, you may not be the one that's actually, a certified Kubernetes engineer. I just saw that somewhere. Data analytics. Machine analytics is starting to really rise up. AI. Okay, again, you don't have to be an AI expert, but you do need to understand data analytics, because a lot of the data that we're getting, where the term big data came from, we have so much data. We don't have a lot of information, right? So you have to be able to, within the confines of your world, have some basic understanding of data analytics. And again, good tools are out there that will help you with that. The emergence of AI is tremendous. All right, anybody working in AI right now? It's a little scary, right? It's a little scary. I was at an event in China in May, and they had an AI track, they had a DevOps track, they had an Agile track, they had a technology track. AI track was packed because China has a national initiative that they will lead the way in AI. So if you're not already involved, or at least starting to explore what AI is, again, very, very important. You really do need to understand key service management processes. ITIL, schmidle, whether you like ITIL, you don't like ITIL, whether you like change management or you don't like change management, you're always going to have to manage change. You're always going to have to deal with incidents, right? Site reliability engineering has a big piece of incident management in it, including things like swarming and incident commanders. So whether you like the ITIL definition of service management or not, the ability to manage service is important. Shamelessly, I am the author of the Agile Service Management Guide. And you know what that is? That's about just enough process. How much is just enough change management? How much is just enough knowledge management? How much is just enough configuration management? But you're going to need to at least understand the core principles behind managing services. And then I mentioned a lot about SRE. I would say of all the things that are trending right now, DevSecOps and SRE are probably the two newest, right, that we're seeing the most interest, but also the most hiring, right? DevSecOps, SRE, from a talent perspective, particularly SRE. I mean, I know of enterprise organizations that are building very strong SRE practices. Anybody building a strong SRE practice inside your own organization yet? A year from now, when you come back and we're all talking, right, I'll be interested to see how many of you either are SREs or are starting to build SRE practices. Yes, sir?
Can you tell a little bit what they do?
Sure. So again, long story made very short. Some folks from Google wrote a book called Site Reliability Engineering. So as the name implies, it's all about reliability engineering. So it's about ensuring that Google's infrastructure, their services, post-production, some pre-production work are stable. I call it continuous operations, truthfully, if you really want to know that. But it is taking an engineering practices, it is off-hour support, it's change management, it's managing service levels, but it is also looking at automation the same way that pre-production looks at automation for continuous delivery and continuous integration. It's looking at monitoring tools. It's looking at a concept called observability, where we can observe the performance of the infrastructure. Interesting thing about SRE is that unlike other disciplines, like how many of you self-identify as a DevOps engineer? Anybody? All right. We don't have a standard definition of a DevOps engineer. SRE, through the Google book, and now there's some derivative works, has actually defined a job, right? So SREs, the interesting thing about the SRE job, I won't go on about it for too long because we're gonna wrap up, but SREs, because it's a very reactive role, are actually encouraged / required to take 50% of their time for improvements. So they shadow developers, they're very involved in the squads. The interesting thing is the book is free. You can read it online from Google. You're not Google. Well, I'm not Google, right? But it did define a really interesting set of practices and an opportunity to measure errors and things like that. So if you're not familiar with SRE, go up. O'Reilly publishes the book. They just came out with the SRE workbook. So it's kind of growing up in parallel to DevOps. I said I like to think of it as continuous operations. So again, if you kind of look at DevOps from a slightly different perspective, you know, ITIL, Agile, project management all grew up out of bodies of knowledge, right? So the ITIL library is 5 books, the project management is the PMBOK, Scrum is the Scrum Guide, and then there's derivative works that come out of it. DevOps is really different. DevOps is a collective body of knowledge, right? This conference is part of the collective body of knowledge, right? A lot of the practices out of DevOps you're hearing about because some organization was innovative enough to do it, like dojos from Target. Have you heard about dojos from Target, right? Nobody told Target how to do a dojo. It was just like, hey, we have to do some immersion. We have to figure out a way to get people to work differently. And some guy, I happen to know the guy, some guy goes, you know what, we should do a dojo like martial arts, where you go in and you practice a kata. And everybody went, yeah, and I bet you it was over a beer. Right? So again, be a continuous learner, but realize you're never going to get, and you should never want, some kind of guide that says step 1, step 2, step 3, here's the skills you need, right? That's not transformation. So read the books, go to DevOps.com, read the articles, or Tech Target, Tech Beacon, go to a DevOps Days, go to conferences like this, be a continuous learner. Try it. If you are interested in certification, I'm not going to tell you more about it. You're welcome to come to the DevOps Institute site and look at it. We have certifications on DevSecOps, continuous delivery testing. Next year will be SRE because we're seeing trending about that. We have a lot of content about it. Again, if you're interested in learning more about it, certainly go to our site. We're not a training company. We have about 140 partners around the world. We accredit the certification. So join the community. Take a look at that, but and then of course if you're interested, find one of our partners. So with that, I have about 8 minutes. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, my question is, do you view the DevOps Institute akin to a guild?
Not in the Spotify definition. Okay. I would make us akin to like PMI.
Okay, akin
right?
to PMI.
So
okay.
yeah, so you know the next growth stage is chapters and things like that. But yeah, I would equate it. Now from a learning perspective, it is very much a guild approach because we absolutely want to have those kind of centers of practice. But again, as an organization, I would kind of equate us closer to like the PMI model.
Okay, and then just a quick comment.
Yeah.
As the hiring manager who's written some recs related to SREs, I usually try to summarize it as solving operational problems using software engineering practices.
Good, perfect. And by the way, if your operations in your local, we're partnering with Splunk and Rundeck October 10th in San Jose, a one-day event. It's free called New Ops Days. So if you are operational and you're interested, Jason Cox of Disney is going to speak, and Michael Keogh of LinkedIn is going to speak. And so you can see there's a lot of operational practices and skills that are starting to emerge, and realizing that the operations community kind of needs a little bit of their own thing. So if you want to learn more about that, it's newopsdays.org. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what's the best literature for value stream mapping?
It's a very good question. So Mike Orson, who's a Lean IT expert, wrote the Lean IT book and also the field guide for Lean IT. Dominica DeGrandis wrote a book called Making Work Visible, looks at Kanban as well as value stream mapping. I would say those are really great. Anything associated with Lean, because value stream mapping is a Lean practice. But I would say Mike's book and Dominica's book, which are, again, take kind of the same approach, but like opposite ends of the spectrum, because Dominica also focuses a lot on Kanbaning for everyone. 2 great publications. You get socks. So this is Taylor from DevOps Institute, and Taylor's holding up something called DevOps Institute socks. If you haven't gotten one at our table, I think Taylor's going to practice her ability to throw socks, right? Or do you want, look at that face. I'll throw socks. Oh, okay. Taylor, see, she's tough. You have to ask a question, you get really cool stuff. Oh, first hand goes up. There you go.
I'm very active in Agile and Scaled Agile, and I've been struggling with the how value streams in Agile and Scaled Agile equate to value streams in DevOps. Are they the same, or is there a distinction?
So I'm going to tell you my opinion, but I'm not going to speak from the scaled or the DevOps space. I think a value stream stands above everything, right? I think a value stream is a business. It doesn't solve a problem, it identifies problems. So I like to think of value streams as being something that is related to the business and not necessarily loyal to one way or the other. And I'll tell you why I say that, because I think it's important. IT, we love our frameworks. We are better than any other business unit. We love our frameworks. And sometimes our frameworks create a Seven Kingdoms, anybody Game of Thrones fan, right? Becomes a little Seven Kingdoms where, and again, with all due respect to SAFe and DevOps and ITSM and Agile or Scrum or whatever, is that we become very loyal to our frameworks. And I'll share one more thing. I'm married to an accountant, right? So accountants have generally accepted accounting principles. Every organization applies GAAP. Maybe slightly differently, but they all adhere to generally accept. Someday, I hope that value stream and all of these other principles become generally accepted IT principles. So the answer is it depends, right? The answer is it depends on what works for you, but don't get married to which one of them is going to tell you the right way. Figure out what works the right way for you. Because I would tell you, part of the problems we have today is because the ITIL folks are still, and I come from the ITIL community, are still trying to say, we're still relevant, right? And the Scrum Masters are going, hey, and the project managers are all afraid they're going to lose their jobs because we're going from project to product, right? And so what ends up happening is we create this kind of framework friction. Sorry, can you tell you pressed a button there? Sorry. But you understand what I'm saying? Is that whichever one works for you, and maybe it's a combination of the two, awesome, right? Don't get stuck on the framework, right? And I'm going to say one more thing about it because I think it's funny. Again, I come from the idle space, 5 books. So here's how you start an idle practice. First, you sing a hymn, right? Then you open up to chapter and verse on change management. Maybe you sing another hymn, right? It became a religion. And that was one of the problems why maybe you're struggling with change management today. So I'll step off my soapbox, but it's a little bit of it. But I think it's a sock-worthy question. This gentleman here, John, had a question because he really wants those socks. They're really good
This may
socks.
be a silly question.
No silly question.
This may be a silly question, but who do you usually see as the most as a typical target audiences for the value stream mapping? I guess it may vary depending on like.
So I can tell you a little bit about it because we partnered with Cloudbees this week and did, Mike Gorson, who I mentioned, led a value stream mapping for DevOps class. And so, Taylor, there were what, like 18 people in there? They came from all different perspectives, some from the business, some from engineering, some from operations, really came from everything. In a perfect world, what you want for value stream mapping is you want this very diverse group because they're identifying problems together. You do want somebody from the business because they can represent the business voice.
Because
But
when I hear about it, that's what I think about the most. Like value stream mapping, how many people buy in from the executive level of doing something like this versus the business value.
yeah, and the best part about value stream mapping, aside from the exercise itself, is that there's negotiation. There's identification of redundancies. There's identification of wait time, right? And so there's a negotiation where you say, wow, that's wasteful. And they go, well, let me explain to you. Or maybe we could do it. It's not meant to solve a problem. It's meant to identify areas of improvement, right? So get a diverse group. Don't get so many people, though, that consensus is hard. And again, it doesn't have to be a single exercise. But yeah, I would make it a really diverse group. Representation from a lot of others. How are we doing on time?
You're out. 1 minute.
Okay. But you get socks. So Taylor, how many socks do you have left?
3 pairs.
It's your choice. I let Taylor, right behind you, Taylor.
One question concerning the beginning of your talk. This T-shaped, P-shaped, and comp-shaped versions. Would you say, for example, when you move from T-shaped to P-shaped, for example, you can investate less time for one special ability here? So actually, you will get worse in this one special ability. You have then 2, but you're not so specialized. It's like it's maybe not so good. What you would say?
Well, think about it from this side. If I've been a developer for 15 years, that STEM is pretty stable. If I'm developing a competency in something else, I've only been doing it a year. Like, I'm not a coder, right? Doesn't mean I can't become a specialist, a specialty coder. So, I think I'm understanding the question right. If I'm not, please tell me I'm not. But the first STEM you have is what we call an I, right? You're a specialist. And then you kind of move forward from there. But you can groom as many specialties as you want. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure I got it. Maybe.
I hear this a lot. It's like a fear of losing what you do, what you are, and like you're diluting your core competency. I don't really buy into it, but I see that. I see a lot of fear with that.
I understand that because remember, no ops meant no job, and so if I lose my specialty, suddenly I'm not as valuable. At the end of the day, you're probably more valuable. And I know we're out of time. Yeah. So.